Hello, welcome back once again on the aggregate. I am Coach Mac Jeremy McDonald. I am here with Andrew Mitchell. How are you, sir?
I am doing very well. How are you?
I am great. Thank you very much. For the 11 subscribers and 30 viewers that we usually get, for those who don't know, Andrew is my cousin. He lives on the East Coast. Don't get to see him a lot, but we work on quality, not quantity here. So,
Distance is nothing when you have the bond and the love that we have. That actually sounded more sarcastic than I meant it. Sorry.
No, it's a little true. And Andrew, you this is going to be a tough interview because you are 90% bullshit like myself.
Yes.
So sometimes people aren't going to know whether you're being serious or not, but we'll let them decide if that's a thing. um,
Yeah.
so we're going to talk about your kind of life and times and your journey to where you're at right now. This is technically, this is a sports show. We start off with the basis of sports and then kind of shoot off into life and talk about other things. And so, just to keep it real with the sports aspect and to give us the jumping off point, I'd like to share this picture from when we went golfing. Um,
Oh my
you know,
gosh.
a good 25 probably years ago. And you were visiting from New Hampshire. And I put this on Facebook about once every few years, and I always call it the worst hip hop album cover ever. Um, and we just look like the worst gangsters. I mean,
Oh
um,
yeah. None of us would want to listen to our own album. We can tell you that
no,
right now.
it's almost like I feel it's like Christian rap album. Um,
Yeah,
but
and Terry's got Uncle Terry, for those of you, I mean, he's got sort of like a Creed Nickelback vibe going with the turn here that I think
he
he might actually
does.
pull it off. Yeah.
He does, and I don't know what I was thinking, but I had like a fat white Morpheus look from the Matrix. I don't know. I ate a lot of the blue pills apparently. It's almost
You
like
even got the blue shirt.
right. It's like I'm in Willy Wonka and Violet turning violet. But the Morpheus class, and you're just and also I feel like you should be holding a sign that is like I've been kidnapped. Please help me.
Were Amber Alerts out at this time? I don't know. But what's weird too is I'm wearing a Plymouth track shirt. I never did track for Plymouth, so I don't even know where I got that
That
shirt.
is fantastic. And honestly, when I pulled this up, I was looking at it and I was like, man, I didn't know he was a track guy, but whatever. Um, that's cool. But
I'm
yeah,
a lost and found guy. I think I found it in the lost and found at school or something.
and you must have been all of just a 15 maybe in this picture. I mean,
Yeah,
um,
I
you
can't even tell, to be honest.
yeah, you
Um,
were a young guy. I remember it was very fun. We had a lot of laughs on that outing and went around and hacked the ball way too many times because I fucking suck at golf. And the ball's just sitting there. It's so frustrating. It doesn't even move. Um, but yeah, that was a fun time. So that's kind of where we'll start, and we'll tie it into sports there. Um,
yeah,
so let's start off here. You were born in New Hampshire. Tell me about just kind of like your younger days when you were born, earliest memories. What was your family like?
yeah. So, fun fact right off the back, I was actually technically born in Vermont, Johnsbury, Vermont.
Mm,
Um, I don't know why I bring that up because I don't remember any of it, but that's what my birth certificate says.
yeah.
But yeah, really, really, most of my life, pretty much all of my life, was in New Hampshire, up in the North Country of northern New Hampshire, Lancaster. Then after my parents' divorce, the Plymouth area where I did not do Plymouth track, and so so I bet it's mostly small towns. I mean, any town in New Hampshire is small, but these were like those sort of quintessential New England small town. Everybody knows each other, even if they don't like each other, they know each other. Um, and so that was kind of shaped everything for me. I mean, it was in many ways it was like an ideal childhood. I had the cliche friends right next door that I could go run over and get into mischief with, and would have my walk downtown with my friends and spend our allowance at the card shop or anything else. So, yeah, it's funny. I didn't think I'd stay in New Hampshire when I got older, but it's one of those things that you don't realize how much you sort of love a place or really grow into a place until sort of that threat of leaving or going somewhere else.
So, were you shunned because you didn't have a wicked accent?
You know, I was not shunned for the accent piece. I feel like surprisingly, people were pretty level. I think maybe what I did, I was a liar when I was a kid. You talked about the BS factor with me. I came up with stories about my origin. Like I distinctly remember, for some reason, telling my friends in third grade that I lived on a lobster boat in Maine, and that's what we did. We just collected lobsters. Now I had never seen a lobster outside of a grocery store there. But yeah, so Maine tends to have that really thick sort of New England, classic New England accent. And then of course, Boston is where you get into the that's what everybody knows, the SNL Boston accent of sorts.
Right. So yeah, I always found that interesting that that you kids, and again, your parents didn't have that accent, so that hard New England accent. So I see that at home, you wouldn't get that, but I still thought it interesting that you guys grew up in that area and didn't kind of get that accent, that even just a touch of it. So, so the creative bug sounds like it hit you early because you were off living on a boat, getting a lobster apparently. So did that start early? Like, what kind of, were you always a creative kid or were you just a liar?
I think it's a fine line. And by the way,
7, yeah.
Yeah. And with the lobster thing, I think back now to this coverage, like, couldn't I come up with something cooler than that in third grade? I could have been like Santa's nephew or something, but I was on a lobster boat.
I really thought you were going to say I told kids I came from, Los Angeles and I was a child actor, or I was in witness protection or something like that. And you went with a lobster boat. Like you went with
It's almost like so boring that it's more believable. I think that's the way I went in. Nobody would be like, everybody that I talked to would be like, of course he's not lying. I mean, who makes up a story about a lobster boat? No, I think, so it's funny. I was thinking about this recently because I have a son. I'm sure we'll talk about families and stuff at some point, but my son is 4 years old. His name is Augie, and we started reading The Hobbit together, which at first I was like, what am I doing? He's not going to understand any of this. There's not enough pictures. He's going to be incredibly bored. Why the heck am I doing this? But ultimately I did it. And he's just absolutely fallen in love with the story. And it part of the reason I did this so young and started with him is I remember my mom, Karen, she would read to me from, of all things, A Christmas Carol when I was about Augie's age, 4 or 5 years old. And, Charles Dickens, I probably didn't understand most of it, but I have vivid memories of her reading to us and me falling into that sort of creative world or falling into like 1800s London somehow as just a little kid. So yeah, I mean, I think that's where the bug ultimately started in many ways is just realizing how much I liked stories, how much I liked inventing new worlds, those sorts of things.
Did you see Scrooge as the hero of the story right from the beginning?
I see Scrooge as the hero now.
Well, yeah. As you know, kind of start to relate to him. It's really an odd duck thing.
Yeah, and it's totally. I mean, you need like 11 or 12 ghosts to really fix me. I think at this point in my life, you couldn't do just 3.
3's just not going to do. I need a ghost of like lower back pain and a ghost of shitty jobs, and there's a lot of garbage in between.
Those ghosts, they're always in our heart, Jeremy. In some ways,
yeah.
I was actually, I clearly remember this too, being sort of angry that Jacob Marley, Scrooge's dead friend, he doesn't get a chance at redemption. He comes back shackled in like 300 pounds of chains. saves his friend, and then he's gone for the rest of the book, for the rest of the movie. So he's still in hell as far as I'm concerned. I think he's, and I just thought, wow, that stinks. Somebody, that was a nice thing he did for his friend. I hope he got some brownie points or something to get out.
Yeah, yeah. You hope he was in purgatory trying to get out, and that's what he had to do, or you wonder if I always thought that like if Scrooge, like if they didn't succeed, that he would just go back to the demons. He would be like Patrick Swayze and Ghost and the Little Black Demon, drag him back down to hell. So you can imagine that when he's Scrooge is going through his thing, Marley's like, "Oh God, do it, man! I got to get out of here." Yeah. And I always thought it was interesting too. He's got this employee who knows the work schedule. He knows he's got to work on Christmas Eve. He's asking to go home. He's asking for a raise. It's not the time, man. The economy's tough.
Right. This is 1800s London. You got to work 96 hours a week at least. And you can bathe every 3 months if you're lucky.
Yeah. Oh, see, these are the details people don't account for. So let's move on a little bit. Like you get into your high school years, a little bit more formative. You get into high school. So were you drawn to writing? Were you drawn to performing? Did you not know what you want to do? What was high school like for you?
High school, it's interesting. I don't think I really knew necessarily what I wanted to do. I had this vague note. I just loved being the creative side of things. I loved, joking, making people laugh, coming up with ridiculous stories. So I don't think I had it really pinned down. And I remember in high school, at one point I thought, I really want to be a writer, but it just seemed like such a weird thing for a high school student to say, or a high school kid. So I would tell people like architect or something a little bit more normal.
Lobster boat fisherman.
Lobster boat fisherman, exactly. So I didn't have a clear sense. It just felt like, I guess everybody feels this way. There was this idealism of like, I don't even have to worry about it. It's going to work out for me. I'm going to have $1 million by the time I turn, 18, and then the rest of my life, everything is going to go perfectly. Why even sweat about what I'm doing now? But I think I learned early on that my sort of what I brought to the table was that humor piece. That's how I was accepted into groups. It's also how I deflected from bullies. I think it's like a survival coping mechanism. And so it was more of a function than anything else, that comedy piece. Until I probably junior year or senior year, I started thinking, well, maybe I could go for this. I really started getting interested in it.
Did you have any teachers or adults or anything? And all before you start, if people understand us and our family and the way that we are, that is a good chunk of our family is, we do use it as coping mechanism. We do use it as just the way to fit in. We like to have fun. We like to be the ones who people are laughing at parties, and not just for the goofy way we look, but for the words that come out of our mouth.
Right.
And we really like to have a lot of fun. And
right.
You got that. Your old man was like that and just wanted to be the center of the universe at a party. And that way. And so I know you saw that growing up. You saw that from that picture of Uncle Terry and myself. We were older folks in your family that really, we do the same thing. We like to be kind of centric. And so I know you got that modeling part of it, but were there any other like teachers or anybody in your community that really that kind of pushed you that direction to be creative?
So yes, and it actually goes back to third grade. My third grade teacher, Mrs. Chipman, she had a writing assignment where we basically had to write a fictional account of sort of like a Revolutionary War time period. And I wrote this little story, and I remember the main character, the soldier, is hiding in a box at the end of it. But I wrote it, I submitted it, and she, in front of the whole class, did the class. She's like, "This is really good. I want to read what Andrew wrote." And of course, when you're starving for that sort of like that thumbs up from somebody. That's all it took for me to get addicted is ooh, somebody's saying nice things about what I'm doing and what I'm working on. So that's when I first thought like maybe I really like this. And then I started doing ripoffs of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. I mean, books that I really liked. So my fifth grade teacher, I remember we had to write a story, and she's basically, I think this is The Hobbit. Like, I'm pretty sure this is The Hobbit. And I was like, no, this is The Lobbit. It's a different book. um, yeah, and I honestly, those seeds were planted early. I'd say third through fifth grade is where I saw myself more as a writer, not in the business sense, of course, but as somebody who like really liked putting these fictional worlds together.
So when did you get into, you mentioned the comedy aspect of it. When did it ever dawn on you? You did stand-up comedy at a pretty young age.
Yeah.
When did you think about, did you go to a comedy, like a stand-up, and be like, I could do that? Or, did you just write some things down and think that you could present it? That's a really niche thing to do, is to get up on stage. A lot of people are deathly afraid of it. It's really hard to write, from what I understand. I've never tried to write stand-up comedy. I'm dick and fart jokes is kind of where I've lived my whole life. But where did you get into that, where you said, hey, I'm going to try that? That looks kind of cool.
Well, so my freshman year at college, the University of New Hampshire, I sort of on a whim auditioned for this improv comedy group on campus. And so I think there was 10 or 11 improvisers. If you've seen like, Whose Line Is It Anyway or something like that, it's theater, but essentially made up on the spot. So anyway, I went along with, he wasn't my roommate, but a neighbor on my floor in my dorm, and auditioned, and ended up getting into improv my freshman year. So I did that for 4 full years at the university, which wasn't necessarily common. I don't think. I think sometimes people would do it maybe their junior or senior year, sometimes younger. But I had it's one of those things. If you can get on stage in front of a couple hundred people and have no script at all, and just work to make people laugh and to engage the room, it's like the best training you could ever hope for going into stuff like stand up, for example, where you actually have, okay, I have material I can rely on. In some ways, people used to tell me that improv was like way too much pressure. They could never do it. But I found the opposite. I found stand up to be more pressure, because if you suck at stand up, you don't have an excuse. You wrote this stuff. If you're an improv and you suck, you can just say, well, what do you want from me? I'm making it up on the spot.
Right. Right.
But anyway, that I developed a real comfort for being on the stage, I think. And again, there's all those other things, the attention and just being the center of attention. And it's also how I made some of my closest friends in college. And it just kind of naturally progressed from there, where I said, I really like improv. I love watching stand up. Why don't I give it a shot? And so my freshman year, at the end of the year, I won their version of Funniest Person on Campus, which is really the funniest person out of the 12 people who auditioned. And even that's debatable.
Yeah.
But that was, again, one of those things where it was like a feather in your cap, so to speak. And it makes you feel like, well, now I got to pursue this. This is a sign. I got to do some of this.
So, and you mentioned that started in college here, and so you went to, this is UNH's logo, it looks like.
Yes.
How did you end up there out of high school? Was it just because that was a local college, or did you want to go there? Did you want to stay around close to home? How'd that come about?
I think I always told people I wanted to get out of New England, get out of New Hampshire. And I think I had sort of convinced myself of that. But the reality is I don't think I actually did. I think I felt I'm somebody that likes to be comfortable. I like that sense of place and familiarity. So UNH in some ways was a way for me to leave my hometown without really leaving my state, right? Because I grew up in Plymouth.
I was going to say, how far is the distance between the two?
It's about an hour and a half, 2 hours. But
okay.
But our hometown, Plymouth, where I grew up, they had a university. Plymouth State College at the time. And so there were some people from my school who went there. And I just thought, I'm going to expand my horizons by going out 100 miles to Durham, New Hampshire. And that's just kind of how it was. And I really liked that it was a bigger school. I mean, I still had some friends from high school I could run into, but I could make a lot of friends. I didn't have to be, I could be anonymous, which in some ways I kind of liked, having grown up in a small town, and just, it was hard to feel like no matter what you did, somebody knew it and was sharing it in some way. Yeah.
Okay, so you go and you're doing the improv. You do this. How does that transition to you writing your own material and getting up on stage?
So I had first written the material for that funniest person on campus thing, and then from there, I took a notebook with me wherever I went, and I'm so glad I don't have that notebook, because it's probably filled with just the worst, most embarrassing, crappy jokes in the world. I mean, stuff that I thought I can hear myself in like Jerry Seinfeld's voice, what's the deal?
Yeah.
I think I actually had an airline food joke at one point.
I think every comedian has a salted peanuts joke or something.
You have to. It's part of the sign up process. You have to have one of those jokes. But one thing I really liked is that just taking notes, keeping notes, and sort of like people watching, right? That's something I still love doing, but it's already something I like doing because of my writing. And now I was doing it for stand-up, but also for my writing. It kind of killed two birds with one stone. So I'd have this little notebook in the back pocket with a pen, and I would just jot down hundreds of little observations or notes. But I was never the type that could really like hone or perfect a joke through the writing. Like everybody talks about Jerry Seinfeld, one of his strengths is the writing. He's such a good, clear writer. I think that improv piece of me still came out more in the stand-up. So I'd have a general idea of where I wanted to go, but I'd still have that room for improvisation, because otherwise I felt sort of awkward or phony in a lot of ways.
So describe the situation that led you to the very first time you went on stage.
So for stand-up or for improv, or either?
Let's go with stand-up. The first time that you either, how did you end up on that stage, like writing a whole material and getting into that? Did you lose a bet? Were you in a competition? Like, how did you end up there where you?
No. Well, I think I honestly think what it was it was just that breadcrumb. I got the funniest person on campus, funniest 12 people who auditioned, whatever. And that was enough for my narcissistic brain to want to do this more, right? It's that dopamine kick of people accept me, people like me. So I think I just was, after that, my memory is always kind of preparing, never having something in mind. Like, I'm going to go down in 2 months to Boston and perform. I never had that in mind, but kind of just taking notes and biding my time until I had an opportunity. And then I just sort of started doing it frequently. I don't even remember, honestly, the first time I sort of, which is weird now that I think about it talking with you, that I first sort of on my own went on stage in some way that wasn't like a structured competition or something like that. So I really enjoyed a lot of it, and I just kept plugging away at it, really.
I made a very strategic phone call to my mother.
Oh.
And let her know that I was going to talk to you today, and picked up this little nugget.
Oh my goodness. Look at that.
So where is this? Do you remember this?
I do. So, oh my gosh. So this was a restaurant in my hometown. And I actually organized this pretty much myself. So this wasn't something where like I was invited. I kind of like, I didn't have a seat at the table, so I kind of dragged my own chair over, so to speak. Perfect. The restaurant, I can't remember the name of the restaurant at the time, but what's funny about this is my dad ended up actually owning a restaurant in this same space later on. So the only thing I can it was a Mexican restaurant, and the only thing I can remember is your brother and my cousin BJ. He couldn't get enough of a sign at the back of the building that said "Home of the Backdoor Burrito." um, for some like obvious innuendo reasons.
Oh, that's right up my alley.
Oh yeah. So yeah, the home of the backdoor burrito, I can tell you that much. But I sort of put this together, and I invited friends and family, and I had a local band that played too. And it's kind of something we just pulled together. I think it was something, the restaurant was Joe's or something, like something innocuous or boring.
How old were you here, do you think?
I must have been probably 18. I think this, if I remember correctly, this was about the time, that awkward phase of graduating from high school, looking toward college. I think this was maybe the summertime, if I remember. So it was like that awkward limbo stage of, is this something I want to do? So it's funny because memory is such a weird thing. Like, I don't know about you, but I have a hard time keeping things in order, keeping things in sequence. Like, this could have actually been very well before I did that competition at UNH. I think it was. But I didn't even, until you showed me this photo, I was like, oh yeah, I did this whole thing. I put this whole thing together. And I'd forgotten about it till you showed me. So yeah, this is probably my first big show, and I had a friendly audience, friends and family and all that.
Yeah, no, it's I remember, watching you on YouTube when YouTube was just a baby of an internet site, and watching you on stage, and somebody, I think your dad had filmed and then uploaded it on there, and you were really good, especially for a young man. This right here looks for not, I don't want to say hacky, but it kind of does. It definitely does look rookie, and you're just like, hey, who wants to laugh? You're
here at the Chuckle Box.
Yeah, I was going to say the Laugh Factory, and you've got the brick wall behind you. It's very cliche, but photo credit to Marion McDonald for this picture here. This is some old school shit. So let's talk about this, and before we move on from the comedy piece of it, and again, this was a short chapter, not a short chapter, but I mean, this was definitely you got into it, you did it for a little bit, and then as soon as you were into it, it felt like to me that you were out of it. You did it for a little bit, you conquered it, you're just like, oh, okay, I'm just off to other things. I want to hear your best experience doing stand-up and your worst experience doing stand-up.
Okay. Wow. I'm going to start with the worst, and I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to go to improv, but I'm doing it because it's so worth it. Because there's me and two others. So we got a spot down at the Boston Improv, which was kind of a big deal for us. We were in college.
Yeah.
For this, it was like a sort of a hybrid of a scripted, but also some improv. So we had like a general idea of where the show goes, but it wasn't fully scripted. But anyway, we were just so excited, me and my friends, and writing these cool skits and spending months working up to this routine. We go down to Boston, and we see this crowd in the room, and there's this big bustling, I couldn't believe they were letting us perform for this crowd. I mean, we were untested, and I just thought, this is wild. And then the manager was kind of like, no, actually, you're over here. Come here. And it was like,
he had you an apron.
Yeah, exactly. No, it was a room that was like, I don't know, 10 feet by 12 feet with like 8 chairs. So even a packed house would have been like 8 people. Best case scenario. It was kind of like, I don't even know what the point of it was, but there was one person in attendance. It was this woman. I don't think she even, my memory, she didn't speak English. So I don't think she even cared about any of our material, but we had to do like a 25-minute show.
Are you sure you weren't hired for like a burlesque show? Like a personal, 10 by 12 feels like there's like a
I'm
light bulb in the middle.
It felt like it was just like an office. It almost felt like an office. It didn't feel like a place to do a show of any kind. It felt like a place maybe people reevaluated their life decisions and decided, is this but it was small, it was cramped, it was hot, and yeah, I guess that was their way of throwing us a bone. Like, yeah, you could say you performed at Boston Improv, but really it's the stage for the peasants.
So there were
Is what we
two
do.
of you and one audience member?
There was more cast members than the audience members. And again, that audience member, I remember part of improv, if you've seen it or watched it, you have to ask for suggestions from the audience.
Who's got
And
an idea? Anyone, just shout it out.
and I just remember crickets riding tumbleweeds across the stage as we anybody have a word that starts with P? Okay. And the poor woman up front, and bless her heart, she didn't get up and leave. She easily could have. She probably felt trapped. It was probably worse for her. Because if you're the one audience member, you can't just stand up and walk out, right? Like that's brutal.
Maybe
So
she was Jacob Marley. That was her hell.
That was she did something terrible. Then I don't know what she did. She made a skin suit out of somebody because that must have been like I don't know how you could go on and enjoy any comedy after seeing something that bad. But anyway, that was my worst experience.
Okay, solid.
And so I think my best was I after I won that competition at UNH, part of the award was you get to perform for the professional comedian that comes in later that spring. So at the time, the comedian that UNH invited was Kyle Cease, who was a comic I really liked, just really funny, high energy guy. And I performed for that audience, which was of course bigger than my original audience because people had come to actually see a real person who knew what they were doing, Kyle Cease. So I just opened the show. I had probably 10 minutes. But I remember after the show and after the conversation, I was able to talk with this comedian, Kyle, in a way that didn't feel like your typical sort of, fan celebrity type relationship. It felt like almost like we were colleagues talking about the craft of writing and comedy. And, he was bouncing ideas off me. I was bouncing ideas off of him. And I remember that was such a positive, such a high for me because it I think everybody has imposter syndrome, right? Where you feel like, what the heck am I doing? I don't know. I have no idea what I'm doing. But he treated me like, like another stand-up, like anybody else. And so I wouldn't say we became friends, but we had a relationship. He lived in Los Angeles and just a really nice, generous guy.
And Kyle Cease, I remember him. He was in a very bit part in which movie? Was it like Not Another Teen Movie, or what was it?
Yes, so he was in Not Another Teen Movie, I believe, and also the role I really remember was 10 Things I Hate About You. Bogey Lowenstein. I don't even know if I've seen that movie, but yeah, he was in some different movies then.
Okay. Yeah, and I kind of remember him, and that's always cool. And again, that's one of those things where you meet an NBA player who's the 10th player on the bench, and it doesn't matter because they're in the NBA, they're in the show. Like,
yeah,
and you're amazed by that person, and it's amazing that they reach out and you get that connection with them. And it's not like not everybody needs to meet Eddie Murphy,
Right.
It's funny how those folks can change your life and they're not super popular.
Well, and I think Eddie Murphy probably would have crushed my comedy dreams if I ran into somebody like him. Yeah, no, I think one thing I remember, and it's worth watching some of his old stand-up. I don't know if he's still doing it, but he was just this high energy, like just making stuff up on the spot. I couldn't believe the way he sort of had this audience wrapped around his finger. It was so high energy, so dynamic. It was brilliant to me. But I remember him talking about his just terrible stage fright and how hard it was for him to perform for a long time and the anxiety he would feel. And it just was like, I can't believe that. This guy goes on stage and he just knocks it out of the park.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it's great to have that. Um, Now, before we leave the comedy spectrum of it and move on a little bit, you and I chatted the other day, and you said you had a Louis Anderson story for me.
Yes, Louis Anderson. So that's actually related to related to this Kyle Cease thing. So, by the way, I use this story for like any fun fact about me, um, because I might as well be saying that I work on a lobster boat. It's such an absurd, weird lie to say, but no, this really happened. So I was visiting Oregon, visiting family, visiting you and my dad when he lived out there, and was planning to go down to Los Angeles because Kyle Cease was doing this sort of workshop on comedy and just bringing a bunch of people together to, I think it was the Comedy Store. And um, so I'd been thinking about it, was sort of on the fence, didn't know if I, wanted to go down there by myself and do all this stuff. I'm more of a creature of habit. But anyway, my phone rings and I answer their phone and I hear, "Hello, is this Andrew?" And I can't do a Louis Anderson impression, but it sounded like like somebody doing a bad Louis Anderson impression. And I just refused to believe it was him. And he goes, "No, this is Louis Anderson. How are you? Kyle says you're gonna come down to Los Angeles. So how do you say no to Louis Anderson? You don't." I ended up going down, but yeah, to I think it probably took 10 minutes of me saying, "There's no way this is Louis Anderson calling me on my phone." But him and Kyle Cease were, I don't know, friends or colleagues or what have you. So Kyle just gave him the phone and said, "Here, talk to him." Um, and yeah, and then he went on and I see you have some pictures up here. Baskets is one of my favorite shows ever. He plays Chip Baskets, the mom here, and he's
Mhm.
just so good. Um, Really funny, nice person. But it was cool because when I went down to California, to LA, Louis Anderson had a bunch of his friends there too. So I remember Carol Leifer was a writer for Seinfeld. She was there. Kevin Nealon was there. There was a bunch of different people. And I think my favorite moment, which I'm just remembering now, is I was outside and Louis Anderson came out during a break in this conversation and stood beside me. And I want to say was smoking a cigarette. I could be wrong. I don't want to put a cigarette in his mouth if that wasn't the case, but I think he was smoking a cigarette outside. But anyway, this tourist bus comes up and it was like divine intervention. It was like destiny because this tour bus of Canadians or whoever they were like Louis super fans. They could not believe that here's Louis Anderson standing right outside of the Comedy Store, and they're screaming, "Louis, Louis, Louis!" And I felt super cool. Like, yeah, this is my bud Louis Anderson. We hang out all the time. My little brush with fame.
Oh, that's awesome. I remember this upper left picture. This is what I think of Louis Anderson as I think of him as the McDowell's worker and Coming to America. And I guess there's our Eddie Murphy tie-in. 6 degrees of Eddie Murphy, I suppose. Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. And that's one of those things you talk about improv leading. As soon as you said Kevin Nealon, I started thinking of improv leading into comedy. Like I'm pretty sure he was in Second City with a lot of the other Saturday Night Live guys from that day.
Yep.
And then they went on to become stage comedians and then movie comedians, and you get that whole era of the Adam Sandlers and Chris Rocks and David Spade, and all those guys were improv guys before they were comedians. So funny how
and
that
again
worked.
it's funny, and it really goes. I mean, I felt like I was part of the crowd even if I wasn't. I felt, because I remember Kevin Nealon and some of these others comedians telling us sort of the inside stories about what happened at the Comedy Store, things you wouldn't see.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows how many of them were true, but a few of them remembered, working with Jim Belushi when he would come blitzed out of his mind, and how hard that was for them to watch him, knowing how talented he was and smart he was, but he was just destroying himself. So that part was really fun too, just to again get that inside baseball kind of thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you're starting to get into the writing thing in college as well too, correct? You're taking writing classes, kind of
Yep.
moving toward that direction. Um, Eventually, you started teaching at the university, right? At New Hampshire?
I did, yeah. So after I did my undergraduate degree at UNH, and I took a lot of writing classes, I ended up coming back for my master's for an MFA in writing. It's kind of when I decided it was after a really dead end job I just didn't like. I graduated my undergrad. I had about a year and a half working in the real world, which was just miserable. And it made me so appreciative of actually going back to school and really concentrating and focusing on something like this. So yeah, I came and did this program, and part of the program to help pay tuition is some of the students are selected to teach some of the introductory writing classes because at UNH everybody needs to take a certain introductory writing course. So I did that, and then I taught a fiction. I was able to teach one of the fiction courses too, and I really I loved the teaching piece. I feel like my improv had sort of prepped me to be up in front of these students and having conversations with them, and so I really liked it. And actually, after I graduated, I continued teaching part time, mostly as an adjunct professor. I'd come on and teach a class here and there, but I just absolutely loved it. I still do in a lot of ways. I still really like that piece of teaching and just talking like you and I are even talking here.
Mm-hmm. And so with your writing, and you said you did the teaching for a little bit, you did the adjunct teaching, you're kind of here or there with it, doing your thing. And in the meantime, are you writing your own stuff in the background? Because eventually some of your stories, were published, and you've been published multiple times.
Yeah.
And again, that's one of those things I want you to talk about is how did you get in from teaching the writing and kind of doing it on your own on the side to where your writing was actually getting published and sent out?
Yeah, so I published a few short stories when I was at UNH. The university has its own literary magazine, but I never really took the publishing piece that seriously necessarily. I mean, it was just more of like a business function that didn't have the patience or the time to deal with. But once I started to really consider myself a writer and really consider myself as taking my work seriously and taking all of this seriously, I became really interested in getting published in a variety of different magazines and journals. What is, for me, you want readers, even if it's 10 or 11 readers total. At the end of the day, you want somebody reading your work. So there was a website at the time, I think it still exists. It was kind of like it was called Duotrope, but it was a compendium of hundreds and hundreds of different magazines where you could submit your work to based on, criteria of how well you match, etc. And the truth is it was brutal. I mean, some of these magazines have less than a 1% acceptance rate. And I went in there thinking to myself, all this other stuff came easy, the comedy, and I got kudos right away. So I'll publish, no problem. And I got rejected over and over again. And I mean, that it was brutal, but it made me sort of realize, like, if you want to do this, if you want to write, you got to step out of just being satisfied with whatever you put down on the page the first time. Like, you really got to realize this takes work. And so, yeah, there's Duotrope. Yeah. Looks like, wow, 7,600 journals up there. But what's interesting too is, so I published for a while. I did the MFA program. I graduated the program. And then I hit another spot where I just was having a real hard time publishing anything. And it got to the point where, honestly, I was like, I don't want to say I was done with writing, but I was done with publishing. I was like, you know what? Who cares? I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to keep getting these no thank you, try again next year type of emails. So one of my stories, it had been rejected a few times. It was out to this magazine, Plowshares. And it was the last submission I had out there in the world waiting to be seen by a potential editor for publication. It also happened to be one of the top magazines in the country for short stories and fiction. And the editor-in-chief called me and said, we have this issue is going to be guest edited by a writer, Stuart Onan. Stephen King has a story coming out in this issue, and we really want to publish this. And so it was like this total reverse of fortunes, where I went from nobody ever wants to read my work to, oh my gosh, I'm in one of the top magazines I could have ever hoped for in a short time. So that was, and then it's like I hit a little string of luck. Where I won a couple of competitions, and I think one thing a lot of people don't realize, though, in the writing world is that sometimes you have sent these stories to be reviewed a year or even 2 years ahead of time, right? So by the time they land towards publication or they almost feel like they were written by somebody else. I mean, it doesn't feel like necessarily your work anymore. So that was kind of strange too. I had felt like I'd changed so much as a writer or grown so much as a writer. And it was weird to have what I thought of as old work end up being, shared as this new up and coming work and material.
So you get published. And again, this is one of those things where it only takes one. And getting back into the sports world of that we live in when I do these shows on the aggregate, it's like it only takes one team to sign you and you're in the show, right? So you got one person to sign you. What's your advice, for your best advice? And I don't know if it's just the stick-to-itiveness or it only takes one type thing, but what's your best advice to a young writer who's looking to get published for the first time?
Great question. I would say something I didn't do that I wish I did was not lose focus of the joy of actually writing. At one point, I felt like I felt like a fraud, because I felt like I was writing stories that I knew would appeal to certain editors who would then publish them. You know what I mean? So it became sort of this weird transactional thing. And I felt a little jaded, just felt like I didn't enjoy it as much. So at the end of the day, if you want to publish your first story or publish something, it really should be the afterthought of the writing itself. Just focus on the writing, focus on putting the best story you can together, and then send it out. I'm half convinced the reason writers have agents is because the agents can deal with all that crap. You give it and you go find a place to publish this. Let me write. I think too, more so than a lot of industries or a lot of things, rejection is guaranteed. There's almost no way around it. Some of these journals get thousands of submissions every month. And they're read by somebody who, I don't know, maybe just doesn't like the story or had a bad day or had a bad egg salad sandwich, and they reject you. And so it's hard to not take personally. And it sounds cliche when I say don't take rejection personally, but the reality is that's the only way to survive. You're going to get a ton of rejections. And I think I saw that it might have been Ray Bradbury, the science fiction writer. He used to tack his rejections up on his wall as motivation. I'd have hundreds of rejection letters saying this isn't quite right for our journal, and he'd tack them up on his wall. I didn't do that. I didn't go to that extreme. But yeah, I would say just remember where you got into writing in the first place. It's the art of it. It's the creation, the creativity piece.
Right. And I think that's great. And part of the reason that you and I are sitting here now is again, not for the fact that I have 11 subscribers and I'm lucky if I get 100 views on a video at a time. I do this as maybe a journaling piece or a communications piece. Here I am, I'm talking to you and you're 3,000 miles away, and we're talking and we have this relationship. And so people forget it's about the art of something. It's the guy that plays weekend warrior basketball, even though he's not going to play in the NBA, because he just loves to do it. It's the person who paints, or they create music, or whatever you do. It's just that art of it. And then, if you want to go big time, you're going to get rejection, and it's going to be a numbers game. So tell me about Outlook Springs, because this was something that, again, I've been sent your work through that, and I've seen that you've been published in that numerous times. And what's Outlook Springs?
Yeah. So after I graduated from my MFA program, I had this strong urge to create my own literary magazine, partly because I had submitted to so many others and saw so many things I didn't like. Yeah, there's the first 3 issues, I think. And so, I never wanted it to be the super popular best-selling type journal. It was never gonna be that. If you're in the world of literary fiction, you're talking about your 11 subscribers and 100 views. Literary fiction, you're lucky if you sell 20 books.
Mhm.
So it never really was about that. But what it was about was one thing I noticed that inspired me to start the journal is that these magazines, right? You publish your story, they come out, they come in the mail, you read them, and then there's sort of these like antiquated, out of date relics after it's like you read the spring issue, everybody moves on to the fall issue. And so it seemed like that was frustrating to me in a way that you almost go bad before you even get a chance to get out there. Your yesterday's news. So Outlook Springs was really about what if we could create a journal where every issue was its own sort of artistic, self-contained piece. And what I mean by that is um, less focused on this is issue number 3. We're going to the fall issue next time, but this is just a weird world that we've put together. Outlook Springs for the first issue was a town. It was this fictional town. So interspersed with the stories and the poetry and essays, me and my friend Nat, who's the designer, would just come up with these really absurd ideas and sort of jokes about this fictional town of Outlook Springs. I see another one. I think that blue one in the middle, that I believe is from I believe the theme of that issue is like a in-flight magazine for a fictional airline, like a interdimensional airline. And then that orange one, which I think was probably my favorite, was an employee. The theme was an employee handbook for onboarding for this sort of dystopian, horrible company.
Hmm.
But my goal was that if you saw an issue of Outlook Springs, you would just pick it up and flip through it just out of curiosity more. I felt like that's a good way to get people to find the writers is just get them looking through something interesting, get them looking through a physical object that um, has some value on its own, that can stand on its own. And then hopefully through that process, as you're flipping through these pages and hopefully laughing with some of the jokes, you find a story or a piece that you really like and you read it. And I think that really resonated with a lot of writers who we started getting lots of subscriptions. I did an interview at one point talking about um, the difference between online media, online literary journals and print media, because everything was shifting online even then. And here I am with I might as well have come out with like a whale blubber lantern in the year 2016 or whatever, sort of like this physical hands-on paper copy, much more complicated. But again, my thing is I wanted to treat it almost as like a found art object where you had no choice. If you just stumbled upon it, what the heck is Outlook Springs?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so, how long did Outlook Springs? How many issues did you publish?
So it's funny. It's actually still going.
Oh.
I should know this too. I want to say I did 5 of the issues, and
Mhm.
um, it got to the point where I couldn't. I was the editor of this journal, the editor in chief, and I couldn't do it justice because I had a kid and a family, and we were getting truly hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of submissions. So that's a lot of reading, and I just felt like I couldn't keep up with it. So um, this guy Jeremy, who was the fiction editor at the time, he's taken over the magazine, and they're doing their own thing with it too, which I think is really cool because again, it's a new vision, a new sort of philosophy on how to do it or what works and what doesn't. It was like the perfect. I felt like I got out. It's like a sitcom where you get out before the sitcom turns really bad.
Mhm.
I didn't want to stick around just putting in minimal effort for this journal just for the sake of it. Writers deserve more attention and focus, and I wasn't able to provide that. But I love it, and I'm really super excited about some of the work we've published and writers that we discovered. And I mean, we publish writers from all over the world.
Does it
Um,
still follow the same theme? Is every issue kind of its own thing that people
so
collaborate on?
yeah, so good question. Each issue, the general, very loose theme is Outlook Springs. What does Outlook Springs mean in each issue? So it might be
Mhm.
Outlook Springs Summer Camp, Outlook Springs Employee Handbook, etc. Everything's different. We never went in with like, this is the writing we need to accept to fit this particular issue.
Mhm.
We kind of like the idea of there was just going to be this absurd sort of art and jokes and stuff, and then serious writing interspersed within it. And we didn't want to be too intentional by having it like this issue's about time. Every story and poem is going to talk about the ravages of time. That just felt so corny to us. So I think a lot of writers were really surprised by it too, because you know it was a tricky balance. Some of them are writing about some really painful, traumatic stuff, especially in their nonfiction. And you got to be careful you don't put like somebody's trauma right next to a photocopy of somebody's sock that for some reason you put into the journal for no reason, right? Um, but yeah, we each issue had a slightly different theme based on this Outlook Springs theme.
And so you've moved on from that. What are you currently working on? What are you doing for your career? Where's your time go when it's not with your family?
Yeah, so I'm last year I started a company, Northlight AI, which is it's exactly what it sounds like, artificial intelligence. I founded it with two friends and colleagues from the University of New Hampshire. Um, they're both professors over there. And I started it because part of the reason I got into AI in the first place is I was really freaked out by it. If you remember early
Terminator.
on, when people were saying, "Oh, writers are going to go extinct, artists are going to go extinct," all this stuff because now a machine can do it for you in 5 seconds. I'm the type where my control mechanism, my coping mechanism, is to try to learn as much as I can about that thing. So I came at it from a place of fear and just started learning about it, and actually became to realize that it's actually its own potential avenue for creativity or for sparking new ideas or for um, opening up possibilities for so many potential artists. Like I think within the next few years, we are going to have filmmakers, award-winning filmmakers, who are able to do this on a $200 or $300 budget. Right? They don't need to bring in a full camera crew and have a full Hollywood budget. They can make it on their computer and they can make it through their tailored to their vision. Um, there's going to be a lot of crap that comes out with that, right? Because
Mhm.
it's like the internet. When you give everybody a voice, most of those voices are terrible,
Mhm.
or ebooks. But so long story short, I ended up really liking AI as not just a abstract technology tool, but as something that was going to change how people think and work and collaborate. And it was fun to. I mean, even now we're still on that cutting edge piece where new use cases and discoveries every single day. That part was really appealed to me. It was like undiscovered territory, so to speak.
Okay. So you're seeing it as an advantage, not a disadvantage. That's cool. Like taking a negative and turning it into a positive. And um, so
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
I'll just add quickly. I definitely I'm not all rainbows and butterflies about it either. I mean, I think there are some definite negatives, for sure. I'm not deluding myself fully, but I kind of come at it from this point of view too, where it's here.
Right.
It's here. Adapt or die. And honestly, I want the field to be shaped by more creative people, not just sort of the technical quantitative people, but filmmakers and poets and writers and all of that stuff. I think that ultimately helps AI in the long run if people are learning and exploring those tools.
Yeah, lemonade out of lemons and steering into
Yeah,
the skid and all that good stuff. If it's going to be here, you might as well take advantage of it, right?
exactly.
If it's going to be here anyway. So yeah, I had my first interaction with AI the other day. I'm like shocked, and again, I'm 48 years old. I'm kind of like, and I was always a pretty solid dude with technology, but AI is just taking off, and I'm just like, man, I can't do half the stuff now that a 16-year-old can do with it. And there's so
Yeah,
many great creative things they can do with it. And you're right. I think in the right hands, I think this is like nuclear power. This is like in the right hands, it could be great. In the wrong hands, it can do serious damage.
Right.
So I worry about it. I worry about the kids, that it's bad enough that kids don't know what a Dewey Decimal System is, and they can Wikipedia everything, and they can internet everything, and they can search it up, because I see, having kids of my own, one who was kind of at the forefront of this internet. Like, she went through school just having the internet. She was like the first. She's 26 now, Bailey's 26, and just went through that. She was at first, hey, you can look stuff up and not have to worry about, don't worry about grammar. Autocorrect can get you.
Right.
Which does not fly in the Mitchell family. We are grammar free. So then my younger daughter, Sadie, is a junior in high school now. And so they can chat GPT things. And, and that's got to be tough as a teacher too, because now you're not only having to fact check what's on the internet, you have to run through programs to check to make sure it wasn't written by AI. And kids just don't have to do as much. So it's a necessary evil, maybe would be a good term for it. But I think it's very Lex Luthor. It's like, you can either cure cancer or you can kill Superman. Like,
why not both? No, that's exactly it. Yeah.
It's wild. Well, let's lighten it up just a touch. So this is a sports themed show, and I know you've always kept a tab on sports. I'm in 75 different text message strains, and you're in probably 4 or 5 of them with different family members or whatever. And when something's on, it's usually Uncle Terry will start the text string and say, hey, what do you guys think about this? Or are you watching this game or whatever? You've always liked the sports. Who do you follow nowadays, or what do you watch if you do watch sports, or you do kind of keep tabs, or you flip on Sports Center once in a while? Who are you following, and who do you like nowadays?
Well, so I Red Sox, I've always loved baseball. A lot of people say it's super boring, and I can't deny it. It is in a lot of ways, but there's something like therapeutic about it for me. So I rarely can sit through an entire game. I mean, just with kids and all that. But I'm always interested in the Red Sox and the Celtics too. I mean, I was raised in that New England root for the New England folks. I don't watch football really that much anymore, and I would say probably honestly the thing I pay most attention to, because it's manageable, is like March Madness or college basketball stuff. I really enjoy watching that, and it's nice too. You can sometimes watch it during the day at work or whatever when the games are on.
And it's really in a bottle. Like, it's 3 or 4 weekends, and it's here and it's gone.
Yeah. But so it's like that. It's like a complete immersion. It's like a dunk tank back into sports, and it doesn't require the same commitment because I do miss being able to just sit down, even with a beer, and just mindlessly watch full games. I know that will come back eventually, but a 1.5-year-old and a 4-year-old, the last thing I want to watch is Fenway Park. Somebody droning on about a line drive at Fenway Park. That won't last. So I really miss it. But March Madness, it allows you to kind of like jump in for a short, manageable time. And then it's like a simulation of a sports fandom as opposed to actually doing it. I just get in, get out, and then I move on.
Yeah, with the young family, it's tough. And even my kids are getting older now, and I don't watch football on a Sunday. I turn on NFL Red Zone, and I kind of have that on in the background, and I just kind of watch, there's a touchdown, or there's a big play, or whatever, if I'm on a Sunday and I'm hanging out around the house. But I don't watch really anything until the playoffs. I'll watch games every now and then that my kids are older, but with a young family, you're always doing stuff. All your energy goes to that. You're on kind of a sports hiatus right now with that young family. So, that kind of just leads me into, I've done some of these shows, and where I'm interviewing somebody because I think that their life is interesting. And then I get somebody who's like, well, hey, and jokingly, I did one with my friend Doug, and his wife Bobby, who is one of my favorite people in the entire world, kind of tongue-in-cheek messages me, hey, he didn't even mention me the whole interview. So I'm not going to get you into that trouble that Doug was in. Okay. So we're going to talk about, give us kind of a rundown of the family as it stands right now, and just, your beautiful bride and the personalities of your kids, and how's life for you now at this point?
Yeah, so this is my family. I can't remember any of their names off the top of my head, but they are my family. No,
The show's about you. Fuck that.
No, this is my wife Amy. We actually met at the University of New Hampshire. Met of all things in improv. We both did improv, and I think part of the reason we've stayed in this general location is that's what happens. You get a family, you like the area, and you just grow into the place. So that's my wife, and she's holding in the pink our daughter Beatrix. We call her B. And then next to me is our son Augie. And honestly, I mean this in the nicest way possible. B is one of the worst babies, and I don't mean that as like a moral failure. I just mean like there's no peace with this girl to be found.
There
Augie,
never is with the second one.
There never is, because with Augie, who was our first one, I mean, literally, we had to wake him up when we brought him home from the hospital, because he would have just slept through the night. And they're like, no, you got to make sure he eats. So wake him up every hour. He slept well. He would literally go to the stairs to go up when he was ready to take a nap. He would go over to the stairs and be like, I'm ready for a nap. Just super easy in that way. I mean, every kid has their own quirks. But then, we knew we wanted to have two, and Beatrix comes along. And I remember at the hospital when she was born, just thinking, oh my God, this is going to be, I see it in your eyes. You have hate in your heart. You're going to make your presence known. And, just the sweetest little girl, but she didn't sleep well, and just very fussy at first, had a hard time adapting to even a bottle. So she was breastfed. And I'll tell you, the worst way to figure out your baby can't eat besides breastfeeding is when you're left with them alone for your first day of paternity leave, and they just scream for 8 hours because they can't drink from the bottle. And so what we actually found is she had this tongue tie, which I guess is pretty common, but it prevented her from, so we had to get that taken care of. And she's unbelievable. She's so like, the reason babies have to be so cute, I'm convinced it's evolutionary, because she could just she's so cute, she could get away with anything. But I joke with my wife, if we had her first, I'm not sure we would have had two kids. I'm not sure we would have set ourselves up for that.
You are just echoing every parent. There's so many memes online, and I send them to my kids about, they show an angel in the picture of the first kid, and then the second, and they say my second kid, and there's a picture of like Michael Myers, and there's just like something in those eyes you don't want to look into. And so I think they're all like that. And my oldest Bailey was and part of that is when you're younger parents, you have more energy and you can deal with more stuff.
Yeah.
And so, and it's all new and it's all exciting. And then you get to the second one, you're like, oh, fuck, this again? Like, I got to go through this. But yeah, your second one is, Sadie is, for us, Bailey was very easy. And we were in our early 20s. We had Sadie 9 years later, and we're in our 30s and a little more, miles on the tires. And she, to this day at 17, is much more of a handful, just day to day. But the second one tends to be a little bit smarter. They learn from the first one as far as life goes. They're very manipulative, so have fun with that.
Oh yeah, she's, by the way, she will commit insurance fraud right in front of us, where like she knows that she gets attention if she falls or bumps her head. So I'll literally see her in slow motion fall and bump her head and start crying. It's just terrible acting. But yeah,
that's fantastic. I love her already. And yes, and I've only met your wife a couple times. She's has made such an impression on me from meeting her those couple times that she is one of my favorite people in the world. And like I said, just quality over quantity. And you definitely, you outkicked your coverage. She's way better than you are. So you're a lucky guy.
Yeah.
So
For sure. Well, Jeremy, we got to mention Ray Gilman, because if you recall, you and Amy, your first interaction was through this fictitious character, Ray Gilman. I don't know do you want me to provide some context? I think it's important to hear this story. It's transformational.
yeah, and yeah, you do that because I think the 11 viewers deserve to hear, if they haven't heard the Ray Gilman story. We definitely need to hear that.
So Amy came out when we first started dating. She came out to Oregon, and that's where Dad, he was living in Portland at the time. So we grew up in New Hampshire, but when me and my sister went to college, he went back to Oregon. So anyway, Amy was coming to visit Oregon for the first time. And unfortunately for her, it was a really stressful time in the Mitchell family. It was right when Grandpa Bob was on the brink of dying. He was on his deathbed. I mean, it's a hard way to be introduced to a family. So to kind of lighten the mood, I just was talking to Dad, and I thought, wouldn't it be funny if we got a picture of Jeremy and made like a fake wanted poster for this sort of psychopath who has escaped a mental ward and is just committing all these terrible crimes. So we made it. I got a picture of you, and we put in the wanted ad. We put all these things he's been seen, stumbling around this area, this neighborhood, and we left it, strategically on the table so that Amy would find it. And we really made her take a good look at this. The plan being, we were going to have you just show up at the house one day, which in hindsight was probably so mean. She's in the big city here, and we just have a fake serial killer show up. But the goal was she would know, she'd see this character, Ray Gilman, have the wanted poster, and then you'd appear in the door. How would she react? We thought that'd be funny. Well, the problem was his grandpa died or was about to pass away. So the first time she met you was actually when we went to Grandpa and Grandma's house to visit, and just saw you sitting out on the front porch. So here's Ray Gilman, this fictitious character, because you were visiting and checking in with Grandpa. And I had to tell her, I had to break the whole joke down. I had to be like, no, this isn't actually a serial killer. This is my cousin Jeremy. It was a whole joke. And she was just kind of like, there it is. Oh yeah, Ray Gilman missing. So that was 2010. And I love this. Do not approach him. Just call the police. I remember telling my dad that we had to find a way to make sure Amy didn't have her cell phone with her. I was so worried about her actually just calling right away. But so this man right here in this photo is sitting on the porch of our grandmother, and I have to explain. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, and look, you can see my dad sleeping in the background. That's the other amazing part of this picture that we're forgetting. He, with his deviousness, he threw in his own ideas and his own messed up ideas, but then he's zonked out on the couch. Which, we still joke about Ray Gilman. I mean, what a strange way for her to meet and interact with the Mitchells. Yeah.
Still one of the funniest things, is you guys walking up and she's kind of like, is that the guy from the flyer? And just the fact that you guys even thought of that was really demented and warped. But so funny. So funny. So like I said, great kid. I love her to death, and I know she's doing a great job being a mom to those kids. And like I said, you're a lucky man on that one. Last thing I wanted to touch on here too was you did lose your dad recently.
Yeah.
And Uncle Dan was a fixture in our family, and just amazing. I grew up, seeing him a lot and coming out to New Hampshire and visiting. When he visited, he was always very involved, came to all the family functions. I was fortunate enough to see him a few months before he passed. Just real quick, because I don't want to turn this into too much of a horror show, but, describe your dad, what he meant to you, and just your whole universe.
Yeah, so and it's funny, this photo is probably just from a couple years ago, but
Hmm.
already it feels like it could be another lifetime. So, my parents, dad and mom, they divorced, and so it was kind of this weird they were single parents, but also they worked really well together in a lot of ways. They put the kids first. They weren't sort of that divorced couple that, pitted one against the other or did all of that sort of stuff. They both decided, we're going to raise our kids together. And so a big reason why we even grew up in Plymouth is because my mom had moved to the neighboring town and my dad just wanted to be in the same space that we were in. He didn't want to be away from his kids. And so
Right.
he really built his whole life around that. And I remember even at the time thinking how incredible it was that he had stayed in New Hampshire because all of his family besides us were in Oregon. I mean, truly. And I know that was hard for him. He missed the family, missed being around them. Um, I don't think he really ever intended to stay in New Hampshire as long as he did. But anyway, he was just it was really fun. We were a lot alike, so we'd butt heads in high school, but just really funny. One of those few parents that I think really balances being a friend with being a parent. Most
Hmm.
people can't do that well. He wasn't afraid to put me in line, but he was also not just like, you do this, son, you go do that. We talked and we'd have really in-depth conversations. So yeah, so as some backstory is really his passing happened so suddenly. I was at the University of New Hampshire working, and this was just last year, and I got a text from him, and it said something along the lines of, "Hey, beautiful day out. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" And I knew you can almost read the tone in a way that something's going on. So I called him, and he had said that he had just been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Um, 8 days later, he was dead. It was like staggering, how quickly it actually happened. And in some ways, so that was October. He passed last October, and it was like it was like going a million miles per hour. And I still feel like I haven't really fully caught up
Hmm.
because it just happened. It just happened so quickly. I mean, he went from the joking, laughing dad that I knew and grew up with, and then literally one day later, he barely could speak.
Hmm.
That's how quickly and his things kind of fell apart. But yeah, he really was, not in a cliche way, my best friend. I mean, if I had questions or if I needed real advice, I could go to him. I would share things with him that I wouldn't share with others. Um, I I think it's one of those things you realize that like it's really rare to have people in your life that unconditionally love you no matter what. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like no matter what you do, I could be Charles Manson 2.0, and my dad would have a bumper sticker on the back of his car saying, "Proud parent of Charles Manson 2.0." And but that's kind of rare. So when he passed, it's just you realize how much you sort of take that for granted um, in in your life. And it's been honestly the past few months, it's been hard because you want to remember him, but you don't want to dwell too much in the grief and all of that. You got to continue with your life. So it's been, I would say I'm still not even used to it. I mean, I still will reach for the phone to call him occasionally. I'll be driving back from work, and we used to meet up on Fridays, almost every Friday, or oh, I'll call dad to grab lunch, and then
Hmm.
it clicks in. But yeah, so that was really hard. Um, but I try to look at it the other way too. Is I'm not sure he would have liked to have sort of a long, drawn out death sentence either. He just wasn't that type. So if they gave him a year to live, I think that would have been harder for him than
Yeah.
to just sort of happen all at the end. But again, it was just a marathon of hospital visits and doctors and, Darcy and I, grief mixed with laughter. You kind of get in this weird spot where like your humor gets darker, but it's because you feel more intently. You're just like, nothing can hurt me now, right?
Mhm.
The worst that could possibly happen is happening. So um, I think my sister Darcy, we bonded in some ways through that. But it was, man, it was hard. And even talking to Augie about it. By the way, Augie, after Dad died, Augie was asking us what happened to him, and we told him, he went to heaven. We told him Amy actually read a book about how he went to heaven and all this stuff. Augie interpreted that as Kevin. He thought somebody named Kevin took Dad, and we learned that like a couple weeks later. He's like, "So who is Kevin? Why? What?
Why did you take Dad?
And he
Or Grandpa?
He must have been horrified because we were just like, because Kevin comes for us all at some point,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Kevin's the Grim Reaper.
Yeah, that's the Grim Reaper's name is Kevin. But
see, you learn things on the aggregate that you just didn't know.
Exactly.
And on top of being such a great dad, you and Darcy, which shout out, we haven't mentioned Darcy, your wonderful sister, yet, and Mitch, your husband, and they've got a great family as well. And he was always involved with your guys' kids, which is immeasurable as a parent. To having him there as a great grandpa, like you said, staying on the East Coast, when it was just for you guys, after your parents split, which again, another shout out to your mom, Karen, who another one of my favorite people of all time that I grew up with as a little tyke in like the 80s, knowing her and just a wonderful, wonderful person. And, you've got a couple good ones there
For sure.
with your parents. You guys were really, really lucky. And Dan made everybody feel so special. And, his loss is going to reverberate for a while, but we talked about quality over quantity, right?
Right.
His quality was high. And the last thing you and I talked recently, I want you to share the story with the viewers about your friend and the pulled pork that he made you and the comment that you made to your friend.
This is a classic Dark Mitchell humor. So dad's just passed, it was in the hospital. Actually, he was at the end stages. We knew he probably had 24 to 48 hours. And I was home, and one of our neighbors, he's a chef, amazing chef, really good cook, local chef, but he had a sort of like a care package delivered us some pulled pork sandwiches. And I mean, this was the best pulled pork I've ever had. Now, this guy, he probably didn't know how dark my humor could actually get, because when he said, how did you like the pulled pork? And I said, honestly, it was so good. It was actually worth my dad dying of pancreatic cancer just so I could have this pulled pork. And his face was just, okay. But I told him, and this is true, I said, don't feel bad. My dad would have loved that joke. That joke would have killed with my dad. No pun intended. He would have loved that. In fact, one of my last sort of jokes with Dad was, when he was in the hospital, kind of coming to terms with the fact that he was dying, the doctor wanted to prescribe him with fentanyl, give him some fentanyl. And he was like, no, I can't. And I told him, I said, Dad, why not? You've got 3 days left. If anybody should be doing fentanyl, it's you. You might as well try it.
Right.
So we can't do that. We shouldn't do that. But it was made for people like you. So he said, yeah, maybe I'll have a fentanyl with dessert. That's just his dark sense of humor too.
to the bitter end, always.
To the bitter end. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we'll miss them, and I appreciate you sharing those stories. Let's wrap it up with the Fab Five. You ready for these get to know you questions?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. And we even have some visuals to go along with it, because that's how we roll here on the aggregate. So we'll start here with the Fab Five. All right. So is it okay at a wedding or a funeral to wear jeans, in your opinion?
I'm going to go with yes. I think, well, I'm going to hedge my bet. This is probably not how you want the Fab Five to go.
It goes however you want it to go.
I think there's some people who, they don't want you to be overly dressed up or overly formal. Just show up as you are, have fun, play some music. I don't think it's something you just want to do without really assessing the situation or knowing the situation. I mean, I've been at weddings where you have, funerals where you have 100 suits and then like one person in a camo tank top and jeans, and that doesn't work out. But ultimately, I think the funeral, if it's done correctly as they can be done, is about just remembering the person, sharing some ideas and thoughts and recollections, and that part of that means being comfortable. Like I don't know, you necessarily have to put on a costume of I'm super formal now to go to a funeral.
Well, and as I was doing this, I get this stock footage of the people at Jeans in a funeral, and then I look at the picture of the guy wearing the Canadian tuxedo, and he's just head to toe in the denim. I think in 2025, you go back even to the late 90s, early 2000s, when it was a lot of jeans with the coat look,
Oh yeah,
kind of like the blending the two. People forget, what about black jeans? You could wear black jeans to a funeral and nobody would probably say anything.
So I have to tell you this brief aside, because I for work, me and my boss at the time, we went to Washington, D.C., and we stayed at this really exclusive hotel where they had a dress code for their pub, for their tavern area. Mm-hmm. And it was coat, jacket, tie, and everything. Mm-hmm. I didn't have any dress pants with me, so I wore black jeans. I mean, literally black jeans. And my boss at the time, he had a regular pair of black pants. I was paranoid, thinking I'm going to get kicked out. And we're sitting at the table, and the bartender comes over, and I'm thinking, oh God, here it is. I'm going to get kicked out. He actually kicks out my boss. He doesn't even see my pants. My boss's pants weren't quite right. I'd never seen that happen. A bartender evicting a patron, but it was like, that's how serious they were about it. And I made fun of him for so much long after that, because here I am like sliding under the table more and more with my black jeans. Anyway, that was somebody who probably would answer this question with, no, you cannot wear jeans.
Yeah. And I guess it depends. I really hope that nobody wears slacks to my funeral. Maybe I should have an anti-dress code of like, you have to wear athletic pants or shorts or something, but if you dress up, we're going to evict you.
Well, how about this? What if you had an anti-dress code, but it was even more absurd the other way? Like, you have to show up dressed as a hobbit or as a Lord of the Rings character, or that you can't come to my funeral if you're not dressed like Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse. You can't do it. That's the funeral I would want to go to.
Yeah. I think really that's the way to go. If you're going to swing the pendulum the other way, sure, why not? Just absurdity rules.
When I dress up super nice, that's a costume. So why not get the costume even weirder?
All right, moving on to number 2. Any actor, alive or dead, is going to play you in the movie of your life. Who's it going to be?
Well, if we're going to go just through looks, it's going to be Brad Pitt or Johnny Depp or one of those guys. If we're talking about really,
of course, that's the obvious answer. Though.
Physical, that's the obvious answer. I would say, gosh, this is a really good question. I would say, I would hope it would be. I think James Gandolfini. I would love somebody like James Gandolfini playing me, but I can't actually picture that. I don't think he has the right personality for it. Maybe like Shia LaBeouf. People used to say he would play me in a movie, but then he went really crazy, and I don't know if he's still around or what's happening there. But yeah, I'd go with one of those.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I pulled this picture up, and I think if somebody was going to play me again, we talked about a great person earlier to play me. Louis Anderson could probably nail it. But I also think that in my life, I would want somebody to jump the shark, and we would kind of go Disney on it and go a little race change and have Samuel L. Jackson play me, because I think he's the only person that as a young man, he would swear more than I did.
Right.
And with as much coaching as I did, I would love to see Samuel L. Jackson coach a bunch of 6th grade girls. And he'd be like, Susie, get the fuck up the court.
Well, and to be fair, you did dress as White Morpheus at our golfing trip way back when. So
that's true. So he could be Black Coach Mac.
Yeah. So we've opened that up totally.
Yeah. Pandora's box has been open. There are plenty of things, paths we can go down. Let's go to number 3. What's the most often used emoji on your phone? What's your go-to?
Oh gosh. I'm kind of anti-emoji. I just feel like I'm like a middle-aged man now, so I kind of feel weird if I do too many emojis. But I would say it's the crying, laughing one,
Yeah.
not the sideways. Isn't there just one that's
There's one that's just straight up and down with a couple tears.
yeah. I think that's my sort of go-to.
Do you use the emoji, or do you like do the like type thing and then put the laugh or the exclamation or things like that?
I've been pulled into that realm of now you have to have an exclamation point. I mean, if you don't, half the time somebody thinks you're mad at them. So everything has to be super exciting. I don't do the emojis as much, but I'll do the like. I'll do the exclamation point. I will occasionally pepper in an LOL, but the problem with the LOL is 90% of the time I'm not actually laughing out loud. It might be funny, but
So then you feel like a liar.
yeah, I just feel like, what am I doing here? Why am I putting on this pretense, this mask?
Yeah, boy, you're younger than I am, but you're an older white man than I am. Like, you're fucking Elon Musk, man. Good for you. Like, you just surpassed me.
So it's very important how you word that. I'm fucking Elon Musk, as in I'm basically another version of Elon Musk.
Yeah,
because
let's
it could go in the words of Seinfeld. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
There's not anything wrong with that, especially if you get paid by the hour. Elon probably has a pretty good rate. All right, moving on to number 4 of the Fab 5 here. So it's Thunderdome between you and a second grader. Fight to the death. Okay.
Wow.
I'm assuming you could take 1 second grader, maybe 2. How many second graders does it take before they just overtake you and you can't get any more?
I'm not sure there's a horde of second graders big enough to honestly plan and execute an attack on me without me still dominating them. Like I feel like even hundreds of toddlers, they'd be so disorganized at 2 years old, and they'd be covered in their own feces and drooling that.
No. We're talking second graders here.
Oh, second graders. Okay, second graders.
We're talking like 7-year-olds.
Oh, well, that's a whole other story.
2-year-olds? No. Here on the aggregate, we don't kill toddlers. We wait until they're 7 to kill them.
This is
like Sparta.
This is like classy program.
Yeah, you prove how tough you are at 7 years old. So a 7-year-old, if you had to fight to the death, say you're fighting for your family, I'm assuming you can take 1 or 2. What's that limit to where they get you? It's like cats. 500 cats is going to take you down.
Yeah, I don't think it would be that many because I'm out of shape. I think probably 6 or 7 of them.
Yeah,
I might take them. Yeah, take out my legs, and I'd just be out of breath after a while. That I don't think I would last. It's so funny because I watch these zombie shows, and I think I would survive the zombie apocalypse, and then I realize I'm the last person that would survive. I don't know how to do anything that's actually. I'm not in shape. I can't cook my own, kill my own food or grow my own food. I'm worthless. So yeah, I'd say probably 6 or 7. I'd like to say I could get into double digits. I mean that's sort of the dream, if you will, but I don't think I'm there.
Yeah, most people dream about killing about double digits and 7-year-olds. About 7-year-olds. I'm as a young man, if I was 22 years old, double digits wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah,
as a 48-year-old who can barely walk to the bathroom, then it's going to take maybe 3 of them. I'm thinking still 1 or 2. I can get a good punch in there and they'd be done for. But you get to 3 or 4. And in terms of the zombie apocalypse, I'm thinking the only way that I last a long time is I get in with a community, and it doesn't matter if they have food because I have so much stored fat that I could probably live for about 4 or 5 years. Or God forbid I get a flesh-eating virus, I might be immortal. Like it's going to take forever to get through all this. And so That's how I
God.
survived the zombie apocalypse. Is just I don't need to eat, so I've got the built-in advantage. But I do need a community.
Yeah, yeah.
So here's a fun one on the heels of the election that kind of shocked the world here. If you could eliminate one state in the North American United States here, which one would it be and why?
I would say, I think it would be Nebraska because who cares? I mean,
You
I know
went
that's harsh,
right
but
after Nebraska for no reason at all.
well, that and that's why I have no emotional attachment. I don't know anybody in Nebraska. I think I may have know a few cities there. I don't like any of the sports teams. I can detach myself emotionally from Nebraska. So it's like that. You remember that classic psychological experiment where like people would push a button for money, and if they push that button, somebody in another room would get hurt. They'd hear the
Yeah.
person scream out or feel that pain.
Yeah.
If you didn't hear that scream, though, you could push that button all day long. You could just. So I don't feel like I'd hear. I guess what I'm getting at is I don't think I'd hear Nebraska scream if I ejected them into the universe.
Yeah.
I will note though, as a New Hampshireite, the true answer should be Massachusetts. I mean, we're trained early on to hate Massachusetts.
Oh, really? So there's a whole rivalry going on there.
There's a whole rivalry. People refer to them as massholes, and the idea is that they come up from Massachusetts and destroy our lakes and do all this stuff. But the reality is they bring a lot of money, tourist money.
Mhm.
People hate their driving, but I have found Maine drivers, and I got in trouble for this because some of my Maine friends got so mad. Everybody thinks Massachusetts drivers are bad. Maine is way worse because I could pass them on the right-hand side riding a unicycle. They move so slowly. At least with Massachusetts, they're going fast. Maine, it's just a slow crawl wherever. So if you're stuck behind them, it's like being stuck behind, I don't know, your great grandma on the stairs or something. It's brutal. What are you going to do? You're stuck.
She's riding that little chair up like in slowly escalating up.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah, that's good. I looked at this question myself and I go, boy, I don't know. I would probably pick one of. Do we need two Dakotas? Like
that. Well, that's a fair question too. I mean, do we even need one Dakota?
No, I would need Nebraska, and I grew up a Nebraska Cornhuskers college football fan. Right. So that's why when you said Nebraska, you just stabbed me in the heart a little bit. But then I think about really it'd have to be somewhere in the Midwest where like nobody, like not nobody, but less people live, But yeah. I don't think we need two Dakotas. They could probably combine to be one just called Dakota.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
We don't need a North and a South. So maybe be one of those. So but
sure.
yeah, I'm sure that they're somewhere in our ecological system, like they're like super important that I don't know about. Like they produce the most glue or some shit like that I don't know about. All right. Well, you survived the Fab Five and you survived this interview, and it's been great having you on. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your story, and hopefully we can get 30 or 40 people to do this and to watch this, just like you're reading the Outlook. If you got 30 people to read your Outlook Springs, then you'd be pretty stoked.
Just make sure nobody from Nebraska gets a link.
I'm going to say, I'm going to get some hate mail from some comments, because I leave the comments open on YouTube. So somebody from Nebraska would be like, "You fucker." Is that how they talk in Nebraska? I don't know.
Okay, now you just earned the hate mail. You just earned it.
I just pigeonholed them into being just hillbillies. So no, it's been great having you and great seeing you. We'll play the outro here, and then go ahead and stay on, and we'll chat afterwards. Okay.
That sounds great.
All right. Thanks for being on. Have a great day, sir.
You too. Thank you.